This video is a continuation from the previous. Okay, so contrast. Contrast is what people mean when they say a design pops. Contrast creates space, as we've talked about. It also creates a difference between the elements in your design. Your background needs to be significantly different from your elements so they harmoniously work together and are readable. How else will your audience know what is the most important if everything is in bold? Now, this has been one of the more difficult principles to get students to understand. If everything is on your page is screaming at you, people will walk away. They will not want to look at it. If everything in your design is the center, the focus is a center point, it starts fighting and competing with each other. And then nobody knows how to get in the building. So we're looking at your house and everything's red. You've now lost the purpose of painting the door red. And so the whole idea of contrast is to help some things stand out and other things recede. And those things that stand out are those that are most important. And contrast allows us to do that. The highest contrast you can have is black and white. And here's an example. That's it, right? Black versus white. It's no color and all color in terms of ink. In terms of light, it's the opposite. And we'll talk about that when we get to color before I go down that road. And you can see that over there. That stands out. Your eye goes right to the black and white because it's the highest possible contrast you can have. The second highest form of contrast is actually red, blue, and yellow put together. Those are the primary mixing colors for not ink, but like paint. Now it also works with, for ink, it also then works with cyan, magenta, and yellow. Those pop too. And so they provide very strong visual compositions that stand out, which is why you see them used in presentations. And I will tell you, it's really funny because of this, a lot of people know this, and they design software using these colors. And so what ends up happening is if you go into a store, or, I don't know if they still do this anymore because a lot of people are now ordering online, but it used to be you go in a store and there's a wall of software and it's all red, yellow, and blue, black and white, red, yellow, blue, black and white, red, yellow, blue, black and white. Every package is some combination of these two high contrast things so that they're all screaming at you. And so how do you stand out when everybody's screaming at you? Well, Mac did something interesting. They created very subdued, subtle packaging, and it ended up standing out because if everything's screaming and you got this one thing over here being quiet and reserved, you're going to notice it. Okay, so here is this very interesting College of Music building in Kawasaki, Japan. And you see very, very strong contrast between that silver dome. It's organic, it's metallic, it's solid single color. And then you look at the tower next to it, and the contrast balances it out. And that it's got color, it's got texture, visual texture, because the red and the black and the gray all create a sense of protrusion and recession. And it's got, it's rectilinear, right? So it's geometric. And so it contrasts on almost every element there is, on color, on texture, on line, on form, on shape. Everything contrasts. And because it's just one gray bulb and one rectangle box, it works. You can only do this if you limit your palette. And it also now creates, because everything is in contrast, it creates this tension. Also, you see, because this is a building, you see a lot of negative space, which is your sky, and that keeps it from being overwhelming. It works. And it's, and there's probably people who hate it. because that's the subjective part of all this. They don't like, it's too much contrast for them. And they're not wrong. That's just personal opinion. Okay, emphasis is when you are going to pick a subject, have a point at which people enter your composition, enter your space. And here's an example, right? So you're creating a poster for a concert. And what is the first thing that the audience needs to know? And then you start to organize your information. And it goes back to, and I'll give you an architectural example. Say you're designing a house and you're thinking about the front of the building and you want people to know where to enter. Well, there you go. We're back to the red door. That's emphasis. What is the most important thing that people need to know in using this building? Well, they need to know how to get in it, right? And so we can help wayfind by painting that door red. Sorry, I had to fix that. Okay, emphasis. Oh, wait a minute, we talked about emphasis. We're talking about emphasis. Sorry, I got distracted by my typo. Here is an example on the right of what I'm talking about. Everything is a sea of umbrellas. They're all cool colors. They're blues and greens and grays. Which one stands out? The umbrella is made out of warm colors. Now, if I go through there and I start making more of them warm colors, it loses its emphasis. And you can also see that here on the bottom. So emphasis creates a focal point in your composition. It's how we bring attention to what is important. Okay. In architecture, it's the feature that commands attention and makes design visually interesting. And you can see examples of that here. Whether those are tile patterns or windows or, Zaha Hadid's Cultural Center wanted you to know where the entrance of the building was, so they created this shape. And on the opposite side, they've got one over there, so you come in that side. It's taller than everything else. It has the glass is shiny. It's got a metallic coating on the glass, the glazing, so that it reflects the light and creates contrast to the sky. It's different, therefore it stands out, therefore I now know how I get into this building. And there's no sign telling me, enter here. So when you look at the building, your eye always is going to go to what's different. It's going to that taller form, the light's reflecting off the glass, and now I know how to get in. Okay, movement. So movement is controlling the elements in the composition so the eye is led to move from one to the next and the information is properly communicated. Movement will create the story or the narrative of your work. We saw that with the series of flowing circles. And I'm going to show you examples of that, obviously, as we move through with architecture. If you look at a design and your eye gets stuck anywhere, you want to go back and you want to adjust that element to bring balance and harmony back to your design. Movement is also known as the visual flow of your design. It's the path that you want your viewer's eye to follow. And you create it by purposefully placing elements in a way that creates a path for the eye to follow. And yeah, this is the flow of circles I was talking about a second ago, right? There's an implied line through the design. There's something called kinetic architecture. And that is an example. It's a model. And it is a lot of movement, right? You see there is flowing, even though it's built, we have built environments. They don't have to be visually static. Now, I think this kinetic movement, actually, the building actually does move. Let's see. Currently, movement in design in general is made reference to it. Okay, yeah. So when we talk about a movement, we usually talk about implied movement. This one actually moves. So it depends on what it is that you want to adapt. For instance, rooms can grow when the number of people increase. Bridges can come up only when needed and leave free space. An example of this is, have you ever been in a room with dividers and everybody said, we're going to break out into sessions now, and they bring out those dividers and they divide that big room into smaller rooms? That is an example of kinetic architecture. It's getting smarter. The building is starting to be able to do more than that, right? We can program things electronically. We can, for instance, there's a way to read the flow of pedestrian foot traffic, and that can measure it, and they can make adjustments to when the lights change. And so we can have our architecture do the same thing. We can have it respond to the needs of the inhabitants. One of those technologies is where, and this is all under building automation, and we actually have a program in building automation. If you guys ever decide you want to take it, get additional education, you can learn about that. In building automation, the building can read the temperature and make adjustments. Right now, the building can read the temperature and tell you what it is, but you have to make adjustments. There's smart technology that the building makes adjustments. And so there's a whole lot of really interesting things that are new in that area. Very fascinating. Okay, pattern. So if you limit yourself to 2 strong shapes and 3 strong colors, you're finding out that you're going to have to repeat things. And you want to limit yourself. I'm not saying only use 2 shapes, but what I'm saying is don't use every shape there is. And you want to limit your palette. And so when you're doing that, because it keeps you from overwhelming your viewer. And so say you've decided you're going to go with an oval, and a big oval, a small oval, and a triangle. And then you're going to use orange, teal blue, and red. And so you need to fill in this space. So you're creating a carpet, and you're going to need to fill in the whole floor. Well, there are certain ways to do that, and one of those is pattern. And so if you repeat, right, you repeat a pattern across the floor, it's going to unify the entire floor and strengthen your design. Okay, so repetition is, obviously goes beyond just printed products, and there's a whole bunch of examples over here. You could see, the architecture and the pattern on the bed. And so pattern can be wallpaper, it can be carpeting, it could be the outside of our building with brick. Pattern comes into play in a lot of different areas. And this is Gustav Klimt. He did organic patterning. So patterning doesn't just have to be a repeating of squares. It can be a repeating of organic elements. And then they can adapt. They don't have to be static. They can be fluid adaptations. This is a model. And so the idea is that the architecture moves around the shapes on the building, create a mathematical pattern called a Voronoi. It's tessellated, convex, straight-lined polygons where all the corners have internal angles less than 180 degrees, resulting in 23 million unique polygons etched into the glazing of the curtain wall system, all to represent the inaugmentary system, which is the nerve system, the nerve center of skin, hair, sweat glands, etc. And this has to do with what the client does and represents. Okay. We are going to stop here and continue in the next video.